Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you today about a story. Well, it's amazing. Now, it's September 6th. It's a Tuesday in the middle of the day, and we were on social media and we ran into a story from libertarians that just amazed us. We hadn't heard about this. You might have, but it's amazing what the implications are about this, and we want to share this with you. But before we get started, we do want to mention that if this is the first time that you're seeing our channel, we want to welcome you and thank you for being part of our audience. We want you to know that we do long-form political commentary, and every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you. We reach out on all the social media that the internet overlords will allow to be able to hear what you have to say about the issues that matter, to hear your calls, your tweets, chats, and to hear from you anywhere in the world to tell us the important issues, because we believe in the First Amendment. We believe in your right to free speech, even if you're not an American. No matter what your country may think, no matter what the internet overlords think, we want to hear what you have to say. And we hope you will join us this Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Today, middle of the day, we were looking through some of the social media, and we were on Facebook, and we happened to run into a very interesting article. You may have seen this before. OPRRF to implement race-based grading in 2022-2023 school year. This is the Oak Park and River Forest High School. We are looking at a high school that is looking to change the way that they grade students. And this is a subject that isn't new to anyone. We've been seeing these kind of stories for quite some time. In fact, if you go back 2017 in The Atlantic, how does race affect a student's math education? That's right, math is racist. We've been hearing about this for years now. Math is racist. School systems are institutionally racist. In fact, in the Atlantic article, at one point they mentioned that a new paper disrupts the narratives of how math and education are taught by examining an unaddressed element of the equation, namely the ways in which, quote, whiteness, end quote, in math education reproduces racial advantages for white students and disadvantages historically marginalized students of color. You've been hearing about this for a long time. Math is somehow racist. We're talking about 2 + 2 = 4. We're talking about calculus and trigonometry and geometry. These are things that have numbers, not races, not ethnicities, not religions, not political preferences. But yet somehow we are being told that these are all intrinsically racist, that they are supporting one racial group while disparaging other racial groups. I don't understand it. I have never understood this. I don't think most Americans or most people in the world truly understand this, although this is what is being taught to our kids. Let's go a little bit more recently. So you may have seen this article, which came from the LA Times. Will your gifted child take calculus? Maybe not under California's reimagined math plan. This is an article from May 20th of 2021. And in that article, they're talking about redesigning the math curriculum so that all students will be taught in the same classroom the same math. So if your child, if a student is not good in math, he's still going to be in the same classroom being taught the same calculus that the advanced students are being taught. And this is somehow going to help them. I want you to understand that. Let's think about that for a second. So someone who has difficulty with trigonometry or geometry or calculus, they have difficulty with that subject. They're not grasping the issues. And they are in the same exact classroom as students who excel at doing these things. And somehow, by having the students who are lagging behind with the students who are advanced, this is somehow going to help them because it's going to get rid of the racial disparity that would otherwise exist. But State Senator Ben Allen of Santa Monica, a Democrat, who sits on the commission in California, challenged whether the ideal was readily available in the typical California classroom. Is this realistic to put these students, those who are falling behind and those who are advanced, into the same classroom learning the same material? He also questioned the suggestion that tracking by math readiness was inevitably racist. He noted that the Los Angeles Unified School District, nearly all the students are of color. So he asked, how then would it be racist to track some LA Unified students into faster moving coursework if they're ready for it? These math classes, advanced courses in schools, well, they're racist inherently because they segregate students. Yet in a school system that is almost uniform, some students do better than other students. And yet it's still supposed to be racially insensitive and inaccurate and unproductive to allow those students of the same culture, the same ethnic background, the same skin color to advance because they're better than other students. Does that make sense to anyone? Does this concept seem to work for anyone besides the most progressive of the progressive left? Let's look at this from another point of view. Let's go to the Washington Times. The Washington Times says, is mathematics racist? California could blaze a pathway with woke math, which is introducing a political ideology into a classroom, into a subject that inherently has no racial component. This is a June 6th article, and they state in here in part, quote, ill-conceived diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, often informed by critical race theory, and the declining standards of K through 12 math education feed each other in a vicious circle, which is in time going to affect the entire mathematics profession and more broadly, all STEM disciplines. 3 mathematicians from Princeton University, New York University, and the University of California, Irvine wrote in a recent piece for the online magazine Persuasion. So, even within the field of mathematics, there are professors, these authority figures, that are saying this doesn't make sense and this has no productive end. You're either going to hold back the students who are advanced, or you're going to completely confuse the students who are not achieving as well. This doesn't benefit anyone. It isn't just in math, although we keep hearing it over and over again because math seems to be the largest discrepancy. It doesn't make sense. You can try and make the argument maybe in English, maybe in history, but you really can't make that argument when it comes to science and when it comes to mathematics. They are fact-based. They have no politics inherent in them. And yet we continue to hear that. Even as recently, and you may have heard this one, this came from the Washington Post. Racism in our curriculums isn't limited to history. It's in math too. This is from December 8th of 2021. And in this article, we can see they're talking about the fact that because in Virginia, parents stood up and questioned the way that their kids are being taught, and they voted for a governor that would be able to promote and protect their children versus pushing critical race theory and its applications. Well, now that means that math and all the curriculum of our students are inherently racist. They say, however, the conversations are difficult even in subjects such as math, which is perceived incorrectly as a neutral space outside the reach of structural racism and national histories. Again, They're trying to impart upon us this thought that it is inherently racist to learn 2 plus 2, to learn long division. It is inherently racist to be able to do fractions. It is inherently racist to do algebra, geometry, calculus, trigonometry. These are inherently racist issues. That makes no sense. The numbers are the numbers. But I want to go back to what originally started me looking down this path on some of these stories that we've talked about in the past, but also the most recent updates. This article, OPRF, to implement race-based grading systems. Now, to teach these students, these children, that being white is inherently evil and it has a privilege. To be black is to not have that privilege. To be a person of color is to be inferior and a victim, and only government and the elites in government, especially those who are progressive, can take care of you. We always oppose this on this channel because embedded in this ideology, just like in modern feminism, just like in the BLM movement, what we're looking at is it is a statement saying that minorities or certain groups of individuals are inherently inferior and incapable of taking care of themselves, that they cannot achieve on an equal playing field, and therefore we must introduce equity to raise up one group artificially because of the desire of the government and certain political organizations, because these individuals can't do it on their own. They are incapable. They are lesser and less than. And we intrinsically and absolutely reject that ideology. Some people do better than others. Some people will succeed where others will fail. That is true regardless of the color of your skin, your ethnicity, your religion, your political preference, or any other factor. That's just human nature. But the movement for equity in our schools, being taught to our children, and being promoted in our colleges it's like a poison entering into the bloodstream. It spreads everywhere. But there is a problem with this article, which you may have seen. It's not a new article. It's been out for a little while. As we found out, according to the AP, when they did their fact check on June 3rd, the Illinois high school didn't adopt a race-based grading system. They're not doing it. That is what the claim is. That's the article you saw. But the school board gave a presentation on May 26th mentioning, quote, equitable grading practices, which value whether a student has mastered academic content. Some districts have sought such alternative approaches to eliminate bias from grading systems. So they're saying that the way a teacher is grading is, in fact, and by definition, a bias. It is a prejudice. And this is negatively impacting students, especially those of color. So the AP goes on to go into the story, but something that I found that was absolutely critical in their statement saying this was false. The article instead mischaracterized a May 26th School Board of Education meeting at which a committee focused on grading and assessment presented an initial report. The report noted at one point that, quote, traditional grading practices perpetuate inequalities and intensifies the opportunity gap, end quote. At no time were any statements made recommending that OPRF implement a race-based grading approach, the school made a statement. Many schools have put into place or begun exploring equitable grading, arguing that traditional grading systems, with their penalties for late homework and missed assignments, can disproportionately hurt students with fewer advantages at home. Schools across the country introduce elements of equitable grading, like getting rid of traditional 0 to 100 point scales, the Associated Press reported. Now, this is what caught us and why we're doing this video. Because we looked at this and we said, wait a minute, that does sound like the school is looking to implement this. They're trying to study it and find a way to put it into their curriculum. It's just not happening in 2023. That doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It doesn't mean that they believe that equitable grading is necessary, that students can't get a grade lower than 50 because that would be somehow negative to the student, not a reflection of their actual ability or the actual representation of what they have done. But we have to change that. We have to reevaluate that. And the teacher is the bad guy here for grading the student based on the scores that they received for the work and the effort that they provided. I had to stop and I said to myself, wait a minute, let's see, what is the Oak Park and River Forest High School study? What did they say in their board meeting? Well, here it is, as provided by the AP News. Strategic Plan Priority 2, Transformative Education, Professional Development, and Grading. So we know that this is about grading and developing plans in the school systems with teachers to be able to grade students and improve their lesson plans. Okay, this is May 26th of 2022. By fall of 2023, consistently integrate equitable assessment and grading practices into all academic and elective courses. So in the 2023-2024 class, they are going to have equitable grading. That's what this is saying. This is from the high school itself. Not in 2023, but in 2024, they're going to put in equitable grading. That's their strategy. That is their goal. That's what it says from them themselves. They want to integrate equitable assessment and grading practices, which means students will no longer be graded on handing in homework late, not showing their work, having an actual score that reflects their actual testing. Somehow that's going to be good for Black people and for Hispanics and for all minorities. Let's go on. And they say during the 2020-2021 school year, a team of teachers and administrators read and discussed 5 texts, including Grading for Equity by Joe Feldman. Well, they also went into What We Know About Grading, Thomas Guskey and Susan Brookhart. That's interesting because they're looking at equitable grading. They're investigating equitable grading. They are looking to integrate equitable grading. But the AP said it's unfair, it's false, they're not changing their grading system. They're just finding ways to integrate equitable grading into their schools. There seems to be a disconnect here. They go on to say that during the 2021-2022 school year, collaborative team leaders recently participated in a learning opportunity with Dr. Douglas Reeves and discussed grading with equity and shared practical issues for immediate impact with the group. So they've sent out teachers to have a discussion. At every point we are seeing they are reinforcing that this is the direction they are taking this high school in, equitable grading, because math is racist. Oh my God. The summary of their findings: traditional grading practices perpetuate inequities and intensifies the opportunity gap. So, a kid getting a 50 or a 40 in a test isn't showing that the kid doesn't know the material and needs to work harder and perhaps needs extra teaching. No, it's racially biased. In addition, they're saying that handing in your homework late, that's a problem because it's racially insensitive. And so they have to work on that. That's the problem, not the ability of the student, not the manner in which they're being taught, but the fact that it's a racial component. They go on to say, integrating equitable assessment and grading practices into all academic and elective courses requires the collaborative effort of a team of educators committed to improvements that benefit all students. So they need teachers who are going to push an ideology that is political, an ideology that says that schools are intrinsically and systematically racist, that racism is part of everything, including science and math, which have no racial components to them. Many OPRF high school teachers are successfully exploring and implementing more equitable grading practices, such as utilizing aspects of competency-based grading, eliminating zeros from gradebook, and encouraging and rewarding growth over time. So if you completely fail, if you fail to do the work or you do it completely wrong, if you have not succeeded in the objective given to you by a teacher, you can no longer be graded poorly for that. There is a floor that you cannot be graded under, even though your work reflects that. And they are actively having teachers do this now. Equitable grading is part of the school system. It's already being done. It's not a policy of the school. It is just something that has been done by individual teachers on purpose. Teachers and administrators at OPRF High School will continue the process necessary to make grading improvements that reflects our core beliefs. And I have to ask, what are your core beliefs when you believe that math is racist, that the school system and teaching is intrinsically racist, that there is an intrinsic bias against certain students and in favor of other students on materials that have no racial components involved in them? They go on that their next steps, Oak Park and River Forest High School administration and faculty will examine grading and reporting practices in academic and elective courses utilizing evidence-backed research and the racial equity analysis tool. The examination and reflection of practices will require that OPRF High School administration and faculty clearly define the purpose for grading proficiency. Oak Park and River Forest High School will establish a philosophy of grading that reflects a rigorous, meaningful, and evidence-based process by which student learning is understood. So, what they have said repeatedly is they want equitable grading. They want grading that skews based on the color of the skin of the student, not the income level of the student, not the capability of the student, purely based on the skin color of that student and perceptions in society, some in society, I should say, that say that if you are black, you are a victim, and if you are white, well, you're evil and you are privileged, which has nothing to do with the reality of the everyday life that many people go through. This is just insane to me. I had to actually look a little bit deeper. I had to see what was it that this gentleman, Joe Feldman, what was he talking about? So I went to Harvard. This is ed.Harvard Education Magazine. And I went to this is their Summer 19, an article which was written by Lori Hugh. Grade Expectations, Why We Need to Rethink Grading in Our Schools. So this is important. Literally, they say that grading, what are we actually talking about? We mean the way teachers calculate, describe, and report student performance. Although we may assume that grading is only a software-driven end-of-the-term calculation, a teacher's grading system is implicated throughout his or her work every day. For any task that we ask of students, we have to decide, should the student's performance on the task include their grade, and if so, how much value? Teachers' answers to these questions are based on how deep-seated values and ideas about what we teach, what we each believe students are supposed to learn, how students are best motivated, and what our role and relationship to students should be. Now, this is really simple. A teacher should teach. If every single student in the class fails an exam, that is a problem with the teacher. The teacher failed to convey the information and the students were not able to capture it. If most of the students, if an overwhelming number of the students pass and only a small portion don't, that may be a problem with those students, not the teacher, not the curriculum. But in either regard, it does not mean that this was racist or it had anything to do with the skin color of those students. This is a presumption of evil that does not have any validity. It is an impression. It is a feeling. And to say that we need to change the entire system because of some teachers' feelings about the education system, their feelings about intrinsic racism that they cannot prove, that's an entirely different thing. They say, what's wrong with deducting points for work turned in late? Which is something that has been consistent for a long time. And I want to address this. This approach combines both academic and non-academic information in the grade and creates what author Susan Brookhart, remember, that's one of the people that we saw the Illinois schools were reading about. They're relying on her thoughts. She calls it a grade fog. We're not sure what the grade means because we're asking it to communicate too much disparate information. A student who writes an A quality essay but hands it in late gets his or her writing downgraded to a B. And the student who writes a B quality essay turned it in by the deadline and receives a B. There's nothing to distinguish those two B grades, although those students have very different levels of content mastery. So let's deal with this. You're being taught more than just the material. You're taught to be reliable. You're taught to be consistent. You're taught to deal with the challenges in life like having a deadline at your job and to be able to be relied on to be able to accomplish the deadline in the time that's set for you. Something that is easily achievable because your peers can make that deadline too. And therefore your grade is a reflection of not just your mastery of the content, but also your ability to be reliable and productive and to be able to match a time frame. I thought this was inherent, and I thought this was something that was understood. Yes, the students may not understand why their homework has to be in on time, but the teachers and society understand why it has to be done in a deadline. And the grade reflects that. Now, someone independently looking at the grades out of context, just looking at the scores and sees a B and a B, may not be able to understand that one student should have gotten an A and had their work deducted and reduced to a B. Yes, but that person has nothing to do with the student who does in fact know why their grade was reduced. They know the context. They know why their grade was reduced. An administrator may not know it. Someone just looking over the scores from BLM may not know why that was done, but the student understands it, and so does the teacher. And therefore, the parents would understand it as well if they spoke with the teacher and found out why did that grade get lowered. So the people who are critical to that student, the parents, the teacher, and the student themselves are all understanding of the context of the reduction of that grade. Therefore, it is appropriate and the context is fine, but a state administrator coming from, as in New York State, coming from Albany and checking on a school in the Bronx and they see B and B grades, no, they don't understand the context, nor do they need to. They don't need to be involved in that classroom and micromanage it. The teacher has already done the work. The lesson has already been imparted to the student, both in the context of the material as well as the context of the expectations of society. This is the problem when we see equitable grading. We are introducing social ideology, social experimentation onto students that do not need to have it. They are trying to impose a context that is not relevant to that situation. They are micromanaging and mismanaging the students and their education. But let's go even further. Why don't the educators question these grading practices? Why are teachers resistant to try and have the state board or some outside group determine how they are going to grade any particular student? Because the teacher's involved with that student. Because they are in that classroom and they understand the context of the material they are providing and the actions of that student. They see that student every day. I'm going to give you a life story for myself. In junior high school, I had a teacher. He taught earth sciences. Great guy. I forget his name now. And he loved teaching. He was a good teacher. I remember one time he came into school one day and he was dressed in head to toe scuba gear. And he did that to get our attention and to make us interested about earth science. And we were learning something about water or something. But it's always stuck with me from 8th grade. That was great teaching. I remember that same teacher. It was the last day of school, one of the last days of school. And I had the ability, he had a test, a year-end test. We already had our grades. We already knew whether we had passed or not. We were being promoted in what class we were going to go into, but we had some free time. And I was able to go into his class. Many students had taken the day off, and he had his exam for us, his year-end exam. I decided to take it. I had the free time. Why not? A couple of my friends took the test as well. We had some extra time. This is in the Bronx, in New York. Not the best education system in America, although we spend money like it isn't. And this is, of course, going back over 40 years. So I took the exam. It was meant to be, he thought it would take 2 class periods to be able to finish this exam. I and my friends did it in less than 1 class period. And we handed him the form. He was amazed that we were being able to do this in a time frame he didn't think would be possible. There were, I believe, 120 questions, 20 of them for extra credit, and 100 questions and then the extra credit. I answered all of them. I scored, I believe, including the extra credit questions, somewhere around 105. The main test itself, I got like a 94, and I thought it was fun. It was a good test. It was a fun test. It wasn't overly difficult. I may or may not be a normal student. I remember my friends scoring somewhere in the 80s to high 80s, but I had scored better than them. Because of that interaction, that I had interest in science, that I was interested in testing my abilities, because I had mastered the material exceptionally well, he went down to my teacher in homeroom, took my report card, and increased my grade from a 90 to a 92. Did he need to do that? Not at all. Did that affect anything in my life? Not at all. Did it change what class I was going to or how I would perform? Not at all. But he wanted to make the notation to indicate a significant change, that I had mastery and that I had interest and that it should be reflected in my grade separate of anything else. Now, I don't know if he did that for my friends who took the test. He might have. But I do know he did it for me. And that was a recognition of what I did, and it made me more interested in science. It was a positive reinforcement. He didn't do it because I was black. He didn't do it because of my skin color or the income of my family. He did it because I have interest and I had mastered the materials. And therefore, my grade should reflect that with a higher grade. This is what they are looking to take away from teachers. This is what they're looking to take away from students, to replace it with something based on the color of my skin. And that is insulting because it presumes that I am incapable of being able to achieve what I did achieve. And that's not just, matter of fact, that's not just insulting, that's dangerous. Let me go on. What does work? According to Harvard Education Magazine, what does work? Equitable grading has 3 pillars: accuracy, bias resistance, and intrinsic motivation. Well, let's think about that. Bias resistance? In other words, it has to do with critical race theory. It has to do with your skin color. This is prejudicial at every level of it. They go on to say, grading practices must counteract institutional biases that have historically rewarded students with privilege and punish those without it, and must also protect student grades from our own implicit bias. Well, the only one who believes in implicit bias are academics who believe that regardless of what you do in your life, you could be Mother Teresa, you could be Gandhi, and you are a racist implicitly because subconsciously you are racist. And your teachers are implicitly racist. Even if they are the best educators in the state, they're a racist. Why? Because it's in the back of their heads, it's subconscious, they can't do anything about it. And they are going to correct that in the grading that students will receive. Implicitly, they are stating that they're going to reduce the grades of whites and increase the grades of those who are black or brown, Hispanic, whatever minority it may be. That's not beneficial. They also say that they must use mathematically sound calculations and scales, such as the 0 to 4 instead of a 0 to 100 scale. Well, what if you have 60% mastery over science or mathematics or a foreign language or English comprehension? What if you're at 60%? Would you get a 2 or would you get a 3? What would be your score? Because their 0 to 4 doesn't encompass the range. There's a reason we use 0 to 100. It gives a greater gradation to be able to narrow down to where that student is, whether it's a 60 or a 98 or a 22, whatever that student is at. And that's something that's determined by the teacher in their context of dealing with that student every day. And it allows that teacher to speak with the parents about the issues this child may have, whether they're tired in class, whether their stomach is growling because they don't have enough food, whether the student is paying attention, whether they have the ability to pay attention and focus, whether they have already excelled. I'll give another example of what I'm talking about here. Some people who know me may know that back in my 3rd grade, and I've talked about this, I've written about this before, I had a teacher, Miss Bingy. She was a horrible, horrible teacher in elementary school. And I had, back in those days, back in the 70s, we had the alphabet books. You know, you had your J books, your I books, your H books. Basically, it's a book that was supposed to be appropriate for the grade that you were in and allowing for greater reading comprehension for students. Fair enough. Well, at that time in my life, I was reading the newspaper every day. My mother would bring home a newspaper and I would read it cover to cover. I read a dictionary every day. She had a pretty thick, unabridged dictionary, and I would read it on a regular basis. I would read we had encyclopedias, and I read them on a regular basis, reading through all these different ideas about science and mythology, about mathematics, just the world in general, because books can take you to parts of the world you never would be near. For a kid in the Bronx, how was I supposed to learn about China or Egyptian mythology or Greek mythology or anything else in the world that's outside of the Bronx? Well, there isn't a whole lot you can do except maybe read a book. Back in those days, there was no internet. There was no YouTube. But because I was able to read these books, to understand the concepts, to read the newspaper every day, and to understand the concepts in the newspaper about science and all the things that were happening, because I was able to do that, reading the iBook, what was supposed to be the reading appropriate level book for the third grade, I was bored out of my mind. Miss Bingy, being a bad teacher, did not comprehend that. She did not understand my boredom was because of my comprehension being further than where those stories in the book were. I was bored with the stories because they weren't compelling. And I had already read the entire book cover to cover, including the appendices, including the definitions, and looking at the footnotes because I was bored. It was too easy. Miss Bingy thought I was just bored, lazy, and could not read. She literally told my mother I didn't know how to read. I was often thrown out of the class because she would get in an argument with me saying, "Mike, you just don't know how to read. Please, it's okay. Don't be embarrassed that you can't read." To which my answer was, I can read anything you can put in front of me. It's not that I can't read it. I've already read it. I'm bored. And because I would stand up for myself, as I should have done, I was kicked out of the classroom, sent to the principal, made to sit in the hallway, often. Thank goodness a Miss Schusterman, later to be Miss Brick, saw this situation. And Miss Schusterman pulled me to her class, asked me the first day, she called me down the hallway because every teacher on the floor heard what was going on and had heard it several times before. This one time she pulls me over to her class. She pulls a book out and opens it up and says, "Read this paragraph." I couldn't tell you what that book was. I can't tell you what paragraph I read, but I just read it. And I read about a page because it was interesting reading at the time. And I just kept going and she didn't stop me. And I read about a page of material before she stopped me, closed the book, pointed to the back of the room and said, "Pick a chair. That's where you're going to be sitting. From now on, you come to my classroom and you'll sit in this class." And she had an assortment of books that every student could read, and she would make you do reports on these books. I remember that's when I first learned about George Washington Carver off of one of her little books. It was interesting. A quick summation of his life and what he achieved. And I was writing book reports on that. And again, it stands out to me because of the difference between her teaching style and Miss Bingy. And what is being offered today by Equitable grading is the Miss Bingy style versus the Miss Schusterman style. I will never forget those teachers. I will never forget that experience. And I can tell you the one that benefited me the most. An in-context change from Miss Schusterman recognizing that I knew how to read and that my capabilities were higher. By the way, at the end of that year, back in the 70s, we used to take regional exams, proficiency exams at the end of the year. My reading level was college level reading. I was in the third grade. Gee, what was going to be more conducive for me? Having Miss Bingy tell me that I had to stick with the rote system that was existing, the iBooks, that I could not go beyond that, and I was to be captured and stuck at that level, even though my capability was far in excess of that, or to allow me to be able to be taught by Miss Schusterman, who allowed me to grow and to learn more. Which one's the better teacher? Because that's what we are facing today with this institutionalized learning. They are looking to say, well, you're black, so you need to be taught special. Not relative to your capability, but to be taught based on your skin color and the social environment that some bureaucrat decides is appropriate for me. It has no recognition of the individual student, and it's being done under the umbrella of racial equity. We have to be racially sensitive. No, you have to be sensitive to the student and the needs of that student. Some are advanced, some are not. In some subjects, people may be advanced and not in another. We need to recognize that about the student, not about the teaching system and some bureaucrat or some academics' feelings about the situation. It's very upsetting to me. Let me go further. On September 1st, this was the article that was found from the New York Times. It was a guest essay, and the statement is, "School is for merit." This is written by Asra Q. Nomani, and I may get that name wrong. She is a senior fellow at the Independent Women's Network and a co-founder of the Coalition for TJ, a group working to promote high admission standards at Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology in Alexandria, Virginia. She says, in part, "Merit demands excellence and rigor. It is not, as critics often insist, an elitist, classist, or racist value. It acknowledges that all kids have talents. Even though talents are not distributed equally, it is our obligation as parents and teachers to nurture each child's individual spark and make sure that all children have the chance to be the best that they can be." She had learned that on the Morgantown High volleyball team, she was never going to make the Olympic team. But Coach Rice encouraged her to understand that the most valiant, healthy challenge is a personal one to strive to do and be the best. Merit should never become a battlefront in the culture wars. I think this is an important statement that she's making. To be sure, pursuing merit requires sacrifice. Merit requires vigilance. And she goes on to say, unfortunately, misguided policies are spreading across the educational landscape. In California and Virginia, school districts are moving to decrease the number of D's and F grades doled out and putting in place equitable grading, like making a 50 instead of a 0 the lowest grade a student can receive, and allowing missed deadlines in new, quote, reasonable late work policy, end quote, guidelines. School districts in other parts of the country are eliminating academically advanced programs, advanced placement classes, and valedictorian honors. This race to the bottom doesn't help the young people it sets out to uplift, including students with learning disabilities, people facing socioeconomic challenges, and new English language earners. Finally, merit is contagious. During my time at the Journal, the paper won many Pulitzer Prizes. I took enormous pride in the achievements of my peers, and they inspired me to pursue excellence in my own work at the Journal and now as an advocate for young people. Merit is important. Individual capabilities are important. Recognizing and nurturing the capabilities of each individual student, regardless of the color of their skin, regardless of their socioeconomic background, is important. And this is what is being missed. In this rush to try and take care of the victims, identified as individuals of color, to take care of these victims who are less than and are not given privilege, that they don't have these capabilities, is not a benefit to them. It is coddling. It is encouraging the lowest common denominator. It is dragging these students down from what they could possibly achieve. Is life perfect? Absolutely not. Do people with bias exist? Absolutely. Can that affect an individual? Absolutely. That's why we have good teachers and bad teachers. I don't think Miss Bingy in third grade in the 1970s, I don't think she did it because she thought I was black and therefore I must be ignorant. I don't think that was her thinking. I think that when she saw that I wasn't paying attention to where everyone else was in the book, she thought I was trying to hide the fact I had difficulty reading. That's fair. She didn't take the opportunity to actually find out and understand what my capabilities were and to nurture those capabilities to the best that she could. No, instead, she had already made the decision. I was inferior, I was less than, and therefore I had to be treated in a different manner. And my resistance to her trying to treat me as less than was counterproductive, which is why I was kicked out of the classroom on a regular basis. That's what we are creating. We are creating an entire educational system nationwide filled with Miss Bingies when we need Miss Schustemans. Now, you may disagree. I can tell you right now, I am sure that the AP disagrees. But even though the school system, the Illinois school system isn't changing to equitable grading today, they are laying the groundwork to be able to do it. They are introducing teachers who are living by that guideline that are reducing the potential of our students. Under the framework of, we're going to help you. We're going to help you because you can't help yourself. I find it insulting. I find it aggravating. But I look forward to hearing what you have to say. Am I wrong? I understand the anecdotal part. Maybe you disagree with that. But do you think I'm wrong? Do we need equity in our grading system, in math, in science? Is racism so pervasive in everything in life? Is it really important to try and instill in children, in our students, in the next generations, that if they're white, they're evil and have privilege? That if you're a minority, you don't have privilege and you're a victim. And the only people that can help you, the only people who can protect you, that's a bunch of elites in government. Is that really the best way to advance America? I look forward to hearing what you have to say, both today and every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I know you've heard it before. What difference does it? You make the difference when you watch, chat, tweets, your likes and shares, and your subscription. You make the difference. From across the world, you help us to keep the lights on and the stream alive. You are making the difference to fight the woke and the crazy legislation that we see before. We at No Soundbites Allowed, and I want to thank you for everything that you do in helping us reach our goal, and your likes, your tweets, your comments, and your subscriptions to the channel. We want to thank you from the bottom of our heart. And this is a special thank you to those who have donated to the channel and helped us in all of our efforts. We will strive to make this channel the best that we possibly can, because you deserve no less. Thank you.